Hello folks and welcome back. In this presentation I'm going to be going through chapter 12 from my book. That's going to cover the whole 2020 bat out of hell 5G transhumanist agenda with obviously the corona, the lockdowns, my personal experiences, right, with demons, with out of body experiences, the underworld, my shamanic activation Soul-Braid walking experience, Starseeds, Indigos and Fims, and finish on the concept of karma. Okay, so I write in my book 2020 was an interesting year. Due to the lockdowns, I ended up losing my job, and as a result, I moved back to my mother's house in Wimborne in order to benefit from a few months of rent-free living whilst I find my feet again. So it's kind of like a blessing in disguise, really. I spent the free time reading books and doing a course to reclaim the strawman, as I mentioned, which was over 2 or 3 months. That was with Bibi Bacchus at New Earth University, with online lectures once a week to start learning about this whole setup and the UCC1 finding remedy. So I came into, I think it was around November, December of 2019, I came into Mary Elizabeth Croft's PDF, How I Clobbered Every Cash Confiscatory Agency Known to Man. And that's when I joined the wealth receiving activity as well that she mentions in the back of her PDF in order to start kind of seeding, this better system of, being able to make money, but also, going to correcting your status and helping to combat this system on paper, peaceably and honorably as an upstanding sui juris, as it were, who's in charge and in control of our estate. So I did an online course to learn how to build a website, film and edit videos as well alongside all this, and to create a course as I was learning to help share the knowledge I was acquiring in regards to sovereignty. I also started up a small YouTube channel just to journal my experiences and act as a means to process the paranormal events I had gone through so far. That's another thing. If you folks out there going through like some mad experiences, mad activations, good way is to journal them either through a diary. That's why it's very therapeutic. You kind of, when you go through that act of putting something on paper, you actually help transfer the energy from your energetic field onto that piece of paper, right? In order to help you process and offload any of that energy, which serves for you to kind of clear your fields and move on, and also get better downloads and kind of open the way for more insights and being able to connect the dots a lot better. You also do this in video form, which is kind of what I was drawn towards doing in order for it to be more interactive with other individuals out there kind of tuning in, listening to my story and leaving comments, which kind of, just also offered that support and that realization that I'm not the only one out here, going through these crazy experiences, which is quite reassuring and does definitely help. So I highly recommend for those folks, if you are going through some mad experiences, then yeah, just put videos, share your story. You're all in this together, and the right people will be drawn to you, and they'll be drawn to you in order to just simply even leave a like, views, or a comment here and there. It's just enough to kind of keep you going right through all this madness. So by this point, I'd been on a vegetarian diet for over a year and also started coming off caffeine, which gradually I noticed started to get more and more lucid dream experiences to control from its absence. Now, I just want to comment on this vegetarian concept because it was about a year, just over a year, before I started feeling like I needed to get more of the purine specific proteins, which is geared towards my metabolic type. I'm like a carnivore polar type, a fast oxidizer. So I need predominantly high protein, high fats as macronutrients compared to carbs in my diet. And that's predominantly found in animal foods, right? And so after a year, I kind of felt the deficiency and I was guided to then go back to eating meat and other, animal produce in order to get that sustenance my body required in order to, sustain itself. Because unfortunately, we are in a system where we need to eat in order to survive. But this goes into the importance of obviously knowing to eat organic and ethically and cleanse the foods, and that concept of knowing that whole animal soul groups and even plants and beings too are incarnated here at this time to assist all of us in the ascension. So through us clearing, blessing, and using our body as an ascension tube for them to go back to their soul collectives when releasing any soul quanta that's still stuck in that matter body of the plant or the animal as food, we can actually help assist them on their ascension as they help assist us on ours, right? But when I came off the veggie diet, I went to a local farm and I was looking for organic, and the best I can find locally was this farm that was kind of free range. He said it was free range, but he wasn't admitting that it was organic. But I thought, okay, I'll buy this leg of lamb, and I came back and cooked it. And that night after eating it, before going to bed, kind of in that in-between state, I remember having visions and flashes of the fear encryption of this sheep that I've just ingested on its way to the slaughterhouse, and it was really disorientated. And I realized, wow, like, so I was so sensitive to energy that its cellular memory was transferring into my cellular memory and being registered through my visuals, right, for my brain with what it experienced. And I felt like, wow, that's like really crazy. That's why it's so important to make sure you buy organic and that they've lived at least, you know, a really nice life. But this is the whole purpose of being like a guardian here, that yes, there is going to be a lot of trauma trapped in a lot of this soul quanta, but you've got to realize that we are the cosmic doctors and we have the ability to help purify, cleanse, and heal, and through us release the soul quanta that may be stuck in matter bodies, right, with, you know, whatever animal parts, and even plants are conscious beings too, that once we, you know, ingest, digest, and detoxify all that, we actually help release the soul quanta back to their collectives, right? So very important role in order to elevate your understanding and not get stuck into being pure vegetarian, pure vegan, just given the mutations in our bodies. That's near enough impossible. And if you do that, you actually lower your ability to anchor yourself into your bottom 2 or 3 chakras. And this is all done by design, actually, that actually makes you more susceptible for being plugged into by some of these shadow beings from the Phantom Matrix, the Weta matrices, right? And Ashiana talks about this. I've shared videos of her lectures where she talks about this on my Instagram, made notes. It's very clear, it makes a lot of sense energetically. You see a lot of individuals who have been on vegetarian diet for a long time. They start losing their hair, they start getting anemic, they start getting really frenetic in their thinking, and their body also looks like very malnourished, very skinny, as if it has been sucked dry. And you start seeing their mentality change because they're running the Metatronic currents, and it allows them to be plugged in a lot easier for the Metatronic currents, and their inability to actually anchor and ground energy into the Earth core in order to activate those kind of shields and seals within our subtle body anatomy that helps keep us anchored, helps keep us grounded, and helps keep us aligned with the eternal life Christic river failsafe host that is on offer for us that we can plug into, right? So you must be very wise in addressing this issue, but know that if you do have animal products, every now and again, it's important in order to sustain the body and keep things plugged in and keep yourself grounded. Make sure it's organic. In other words, work if it isn't. You can consciously work through visualizations, affirmations, or some of the techniques at arhayas.com with the Maharic Shield and working with the plasmas now especially. You can purify and cleanse anything before going into your body, right? Even organic food, it's worth doing, purifying it and cleansing. Okay, so you don't know what kind of energetic miasma it's picked up along the way from going from the farm to your plate, right? So it's always good to get into that practice of blessing, purifying, and cleansing, and thanking, right, the energy that you're about to take on. But do it mindfully, knowing that it's here to assist us in our journey of ascension, and we can assist it in releasing any soul quanta back to their collectives. So I continue. However, when the lockdowns hit in March in 2020, I did notice an activation of some kind that led to an energetic shift across the globe. That wasn't a good one. This shift felt like a Metatronic activation, possibly through the 5G network they had fully switched on, which acted like another tough barrier to penetrate through when slipping into the dream state / astrals, and when meditating, gaining access to clarity of thought and connection to insights, etc., which made it more difficult after this noticeable shift in our ionosphere. I read a book titled Invisible Rainbow by Arthur Furstenberg, who documented well the series of recent historical pandemics and its correlation to the increase in EMF exposure from man-made devices, i.e. the Spanish flu pandemic back in the 1920s timely coincided with the release of radar technology on Navy ships from the Navy men, who then came back and dispersed that kind of pathogen that was released amongst the population. Another book by Dr. Joseph McCullough titled EMF also alluded to the many myriad of problems which are related to increased EMF exposure, okay, which goes into voltage gate calcium channels, and how the exposure to high radiation of EMF can actually lead to the leaching of calcium into your blood and your body's inability to uptake calcium in the cells properly. And this is interesting because when I did a hair sample test I sent away at the end of the year, it had not only barium, which is a heavy toxic metal that's highly conductive, off the chart, which was obviously as a result of me being exposed to what they were chemtrailing, but also my calcium ratios were all off as well, showing that there was so much calcium in my blood or in my hair that they were picked up on with this hair analysis test, otherwise indicating and proving to me my exposure, what I'd been witnessing and felt theoretically was, proved that as a result of me being exposed to the EMF, my voltage gate calcium channels were disrupted, and obviously me being exposed to the chemtrails, barium ended up in my blood-brain barrier, and with the infrastructure now of the 5G and the uptick in exposure of this man-made EMF, obviously all coincided with the kind of symptoms I was experiencing that year, being like really out of sorts, and like I said, not being able to kind of tap into the astrals and the dream state as easily, and knowing that there was a lot more interference in in general in the atmosphere, right, for these technologies. So that's a good book. Dr. Joseph McCullough, EMF'd. Also, there was a good documentary put together on YouTube titled Resonance, Beings of Frequency, which is on my YouTube channel as well, which all offered me the knowledge to ascertain what we were witnessing, and what I had felt with this uptick in discordant frequency was a result of being exposed to a sudden uptick in man-made ET-organized EMF technologies via 5G that, as we have already touched on, bring about a myriad of effects in our biologies, from activating Metatronic implants to releasing and activating certain pathogens that lay dormant in our DNA, to psychotronic mind control weaponry, to triggering all kinds of pathologies related to chronic illness and disease. And on top of that, given that we're in a stellar activation cycle with these stellar wave infusions coming in, that also acts to stress the DNA template in our cells, which can then release in the nucleus these dormant pathogens and all kinds of other things that are hidden in there, which obviously, if your body isn't able to run the frequencies effectively and detoxify it properly, then you're going to encounter problems. Okay, and that's all part of the symptoms that we've gone over before with ascension symptoms too. So we're kind of up against it, which is why it's so important during this time to just take care of our mind, body, and spirit as best we can. So I started noticing an increased volume of heavy chem training compared to normal. That all started to uptake in 2020, especially when this was all going on as well. I remember thinking, given the timeline of the so-called Book of Revelation and the Great Sun in Heaven, that this was all happening right on cue within the timeline of the 7 years. They were obviously trying to assert their full takeover and control of Earth and its inhabitants to align with the full timeline, where I remember seeing glimpses of this with how they were starting to build all of these concentration camps in the UK and across the world to herd people like sheep under the guise of public health and safety mandates. I remember seeing that. You kind of almost got like a pocket, like a little glimpse as to those timelines where they started to erect all these concentration camps. FEMA was kind of just there waiting, ready to go to lock in that timeline. But luckily enough of us resisted, right, in this collective consciousness war with free will in order to not go down that path as quickly. So they've gone back to the drawing board and they're kind of doing it a slow drip way. But that was like a test run for them without a doubt. And what's interesting in the teachings, Yasha mentions that there was a shield split back in 2012. Shield is just referencing a group of collective individuals, many indigos and souls that have come here, on purpose to help aid in the earth not falling into a black hole for alignment, and actually helping to host out portions of its quantum and life fields to go back into eternal life ascension potential. That there was a split due to an infiltration by the Fatali, and that split the shield, the consciousness collective, which meant that half the individuals actually start to take on the reverse coding and the Fatali body snatching agendas, and half of them kind of broke away and obviously stayed protected and moved forward with what she did with the plasma teachings, which were addressing the higher uptick in this invisible war drama with the energies and the kind of entities now at battle with one another to try and separate the wheat from the chaff with this battling of the spirals, battling of the energies, the kind of end times conflict drama. That she mentions there's like an 8-year outpicturing schedule in her teachings. So 2012 plus 8 years is 2020. And so what I believe we saw outpicture was a result of what happened energetically in the biological life field of that shield split was outpicturing on the planet in 2020. And that's what we saw. And how divisive was that experience? Because I remember even seeing, well, it speaks for itself, right? We're here 5 years later. I'm recording this in 2025. And based on people's alignment with how they responded due to the obvious fraud and the pandemic that was, rolled out, you had individuals who were kind of like, yes, Uncle Sam, I'll do anything you say because you're my God and I love you. No connection to spirit, compared to those who just saw the absolute bullshit that was going on, could see right through the fraud and how it was all set up and connect all the dots. Like, didn't have to be a genius. And unfortunately, had those kind of like people in between that kind of knew there was something fishy about it, but due to where they were precariously positioned in their lives, having to be dependent on their job and not knowing that, not having the knowledge of their rights and the law, and being able to withdraw consent and still keep, you know, your job and actually fight back intelligently on paper within the law system, that you saw a massive split at least happen. And by now, I think it's pretty much locked in, right? And unfortunately, those individuals, it's obviously affected a large quantum of the consciousness here on the planet. But the good news is there doesn't have to actually be many individuals of the Indigos and the Starseeds that are here that are in alignment with the truth, that are actually tapping into the higher energies in order to reach critical mass. I think in the book she mentions that only 8%, it's only 8% of the population, right, needs to actually be aligned with the truth in order to kind of like safeguard the essential potential and not have the whole thing go down into black hole fault alignment, all right, which would have been pretty gnarly and nasty. And we got, like I said, a glimpse. And she even mentions, like, you think of the Nazis, what happened then with the concentration camp. She said the fatality are like 100 times worse, right? These guys are just the worst demonic entities that have no heart, no compassion. And yeah, luckily we have a mission that is underway to stop the worst and the worst happening. Okay, but it's still going to be a bit bumpy, a bit rocky. But yeah, we're not going to experience the worst of the worst, hopefully, fingers crossed. I mean, so far, so good with all the updates and what I've experienced, especially my intervention. But yeah, it's not been easy, but it could be far worse, let's put it that way. So yeah, how interesting, 8 years, see it all out picture. That certainly was a huge division. And we're still seeing it today, just people just don't get it. Whatever was put in the Jabberwocky is still spraying. I mean, even the unvaccinated, unfortunately, are picking up on this technology. I mean, I even feel it in my body, to be honest. But I work daily and I live a life to try and manage that so my body can, you know, detoxify it and, you know, still be at my best, even though I'm slightly compromised with these kind of technologies that are being used, right? And that's all we can do. That's all we can do, unfortunately, given where we are. But yeah, let's hope with the things that are shifting with the energies that we are being assisted and we can tap into that. And as time goes on, as these energetic kind of benchmarks are reached within the mission, things will continue to get better for those individuals who are kind of on that path of eternal life ascension and coming back into the connection with the higher self and the truth and everything else. So we also had obviously the biggest tool for these guys, right? The spell casting done through the broadcasting of the media, which was the name for the Greek goddess of illusion, okay, Medea, were belting out lots of hidden codes in March 2020 with their choreographed international reporting of 33 new cases. I think there's a video online that many people kind of start circulating, but it's so obvious, like they were just reading off the same script. 33 new cases being dictated conveniently in a lot of places all around the world, right, just after that spring equinox, with the script being near identical for these new news anchors globally. We had the whole satanic mockery go on with the idiots bending a knee in response to the cop who supposedly killed a black person, George Floyd, you can see in the image there, whilst on duty by pressing his knee on his neck. That spread like wildfire online, prompting authorities to honour the Black Lives Matter by getting popular sports people from all over the world and teams before games to bend the knee in solidarity. Bending or taking the knee is a sign of respect, submission or worship, so the elite black magicians knew what they were doing here to get the whole population to bend the knee to their new world order and to pay homage to their lords. Right, I remember that I think it was Quantum Red Pill Cafe with Johann Fritz mentioned, to give you an insight as to a full planetary invasion by the Draconians. So this is just like a quite low level expression of evil. There's a video I'll pop up when I do the edit on YouTube by Oat Studios, and I forgot what it's called. I think it's called Raka by Oat Studios. And otherwise depicts, it's like a short film. It's got Sigourney Weaver in it. It's actually quite well made, but he otherwise alludes that, look, if a planet is under full occupation of these Draconians, this is how it would look like. It goes into showing like some pretty nasty stuff that does go on and has gone on, apparently, according to Johann Fritz, who's part of the Super Soldier Community Talk Secret Space Program folks. Okay, so yeah, just there for your consideration. So I think luckily there were enough of us on planet to help resist this complete takeover attempt of the collective, which helped steer the timeline back onto the best possible one. However, it certainly laid the foundation for what I was about to experience with evil showing up on my doorstep. okay, around August, September 2020. The MCEO AMCC teachings talk about indigo hunts, which has also happened all throughout history, with raider races getting rid of and claiming the codes from Christic Guardian races here on Earth. Yasha also claims the Fatali are responsible for 2020, who joined and is now leading the United Intruder Resistance shortly after 2012, as Guardian intervention had proven to be successful in preventing the whole apocalyptic timeline of what these races wanted to manifest when dragging a whole time matrix into their black hole to help provide more fuel for their phantom reality fields and immortal existence. A process that would have resulted in the poles flipping, which many new ages out there were all helping to spread and manifest, revealing where they were truly plugged into. This is all that kind of alpha and omega programming that's being run. So many individuals, even me, that I allude to a little bit when kind of following these prophecies, Nostradamus and, Naughty Beaver with dissecting the book of Revelations and stuff, that I was like, yeah, venerating all these kind of alignments and look to the skies for this to happen. And that was all to do with, obviously, them opening up wormholes and wanting to suck our solar system, or what it was connected to, up the stack of creation and our matrix down and into that black hole. So yeah, all of that's being purged in a lot of individuals too, and it's a process that you have to go through. And it's interesting that you see like certain individuals go from like one fallen angelic group to another, until inevitably you rise up above the noise and confusion and you see all of it for what it truly is: a bunch of lies, disempowering, under the fear of God mainly, which is not empowering whatsoever, and it's all designed to prevent us from finding the truth with the freedom teachings, right? So yeah, it's a bit of a quagmire, but it's a process that those have to go through in order to detoxify these programs that are on like a psychological level, energetic level, before coming into the truth. That's why you have to do a lot of shadow work and inner work in order to get there, as I've proven and first-hand experience in doing. It took me like 4 or 5 years before I came into the Emerald Covenant freedom teachings. Before then, I was kind of like scratching around in the dark, and that just all of a sudden gave me that higher perspective, which is invaluable. Context is invaluable when discerning right from wrong, eternal life from finite life, etc. So these guys are the worst of the worst in relation to the Fatali of the fallen races, supposedly, as they are the highest and most potent and powerful fallen expressions of the Fim born, who came in to try and help directly from the deity planes, carrying and possessing higher codes, who are now at the forefront of this psychological warfare taking place to try and drag as much soul quanta into toroidal rift black hole fall as possible. Hence the whole rollout of the COVID-19 and the technologies being used in the Jabberwockies and 5G to entrain, tag and bag the minds of as many as they can before the great separation is complete. Now, in Iyash's lecture, which I'll do a pop-up on my Odyssey channel, of going into more detail with these fallen races and the Borgia matrix and the big black hole reality fields, she refers to them as the white dragons, the fatality of the white dragons, and they are primarily reptilian, okay, who resided up in the deity planes, and they incarnated in order to try and help some of these fallen systems, but then they fell themselves and took on the reverse mathematics, templates, and consciousness, and they're otherwise, they were linked into a family called the Dragoon, which obviously where we get the dragons from. So quite interesting to see that it is still related to dragons and reptilians, with the kind of worst of the worst of these fallen entities. So here you can see in the slide, obviously the ritual that was going on with bending the knee. I just innately just could see into the symbolism and everything that was going on a mass scale, and just otherwise mourning at the death of human consciousness, and how easily controlled they are, and how amenable they are, and have no ability to think for themselves and just go along to get along. It truly is tragic, but we are where we are, and you kind of have to go through that process of mourning. Hence why they almost mock that as well, because they have done what they've done, and they realize that we are just a fragment, a mere fractal of who we truly were as Christic cosmic doctor guardians, as eternal beings up in density 2. That everything that they do is just there to mock all of us and all of the guardians and all of our higher selves, to show that we're dumbed down, stupid little minions that they can control. And they certainly have proved that. So hats off to them, congratulations. But it's up to us to use that. I guess for me, it was a lot of anger, and transmute that anger into productive action in order to put a stop to this, or at least try my best to do what I can in order to reveal the truth. So you also got a BBC article there with the black goo coming from the eyes, with the tomorrow's tech, freshest tech article, the CES, which is some kind of exhibition of technology they do each year. And then the gematria behind corona, using the standard English alphabet gematria with assigning the letters to each numbers to each letter, C being 3, A being 1, etc. You've got 6 letters in the word corona, then you've got 66 when you add them all up, which is 666. You've got to stand 6 feet apart, obviously, and that was all part of them kind of testing the scanning abilities of the technologies that are now being used, that everyone has in their biology, unfortunately. But it's nothing to be feared, because if you're doing the techniques and running the proper currents and staying mindful, looking after yourself, you can create a buffer field and you can help to switch them off. Any nanobots or femtotech that you might have in your body as a result of this, and any EMF radiation you might be exposed to, obviously, yes, you can move yourself away from being exposed to too much radiation, but you can also do the techniques, the simple, even at the external creation level of the light and sound body, the Maharic shield she mentions in her book that she references is sufficient in order to protect yourself from these man-made technologies. But even going into the deeper plasma levels, which are the higher order of energy behind the kind of it's like the dark matter template, right, behind light and sound, that if you start working with that with the techniques, then you will be fine. You'll be, held within the divine protectorate, and you can unlock your ascension potential. So there's no need to fear, but there are plenty of solutions out there, in terms of like EMF shielding, for starters, organic diet, recognizing your metabolic typing, exercising, getting sunlight, being in nature. You can relocate to places that aren't as built up and exposed to, a lot of radiation. And you can also start doing the techniques, activating your subtle body anatomy, especially with the plasmas. So that, it's important to identify the problem, but more important to know that we've got a myriad of solutions here for us. So see here that obviously during this time, and obviously since I awakened, I mentioned in my book and these presentations that the new language of symbolism opened up to me. And so, movies were very rich, TV shows were very rich, advertising, news article were all very rich in symbolism that I was picking up on. So there was a lot of TV shows and movies. This is only just a few of them, right, that I talk about and share in my book that kind of exposed their agenda. Because in black magic and under universal law, they must tell us what they want to do before they do it, right? And that's all about predictive programming, soft disclosure. And that way, this goes into them being able to bypass some of the karma, right? That there is no consequence if the whole population kind of agree. And it's mostly done through kind of silent acquiescence and, just through actions of going along to get along with everything that they roll out, that they're allowed to get away with this. And this is what locks in. And through our manifestation abilities, they work through that in order to help lock in and secure certain timelines and technologies that they bring on planet through our consent, our collective consent, which mostly happens through silent acquiescence, which is why it's so important with the work I've done and what I woke up and what I was guided to vocally and on paper withdraw our consent, with the status correction, everything that's going on with the legal tricks and traps, and even mindfully when watching these movies and TV shows, reading articles, and constantly just withdrawing consent, not giving these guys any excuse to use against you or your higher self and these councils in order to say, look, no, he's consenting, she's consenting, they're consenting, right? In this grand calculus of these probability maps and zones and timelines that are being constantly, shifting and changing and calculated based on the whole collective shield of humanity's decisions. And free will being allowed to be explored, which is why, there is going to be a split, because there will be, God's source always respects free will. There will be portions of those individuals who want to go and experience full and merge in their biology with the machine, okay, until they get returned to space dust and reabsorb into source, healed, and then repurposed for something new with another holographic time matrix, okay, whereas other people will obviously be aligned using their free will to go back to eternal life, organic ascension, that be respected too. So we have here Altered Carbon is a TV series released in 2018, showcasing a dystopian future where immortality is unlocked via technology, where consciousness can be stored and transferred via small disc-like stacks that you can see there in the image in the back of the neck that get inserted into the cervical of a new cloned body that is grown artificially in the lab called a sleeve. These sleeves can be enhanced with cybernetic tech, make them stronger, faster, etc., similar to the super soldier testimonies involved with the MyLabs and other experiments. The infinity symbol was also used in 2022's FIFA Soccer World Cup with the snake eating its own tail, and also in the movie Infinity with Mark Wahlberg there, with the similar theme of consciousness being snatched and stored in artificial reality computers. The Ouroboros represents the snake eating its own tail, meaning a never-ending cycle of capped evolution, akin to the fallen Anunnaki doctrines of the I Ching, with the 64th I Ching meaning nearing completion, but can never get there, which is part of the 64-bit checkerboard matrix mutation, where technology is used to fuel immortality for some races and trap the minds of many for soul quanta harvesting. And it kind of goes into also the 88, I think you got 88 squares on a chessboard with the black and white, and that goes into the checkerboard matrix that you see in most Freemasonic temples, which is linked into the Nibirian Dyadic crystal grid. If you recollect, that kind of anchors in from Nibiru and Wormwood via the moon into Stonehenge, and then out through those crystal temple bases, which program the matter base here on the planet, and also the biological life fields, in order to run specific programs like the victim-victimizer drama, the predator-prey drama, etc., that can creep in subconsciously and unconsciously to most of the masses, which is what's perpetuated and rolled out and then enacted effectively and outpictured, right? So it all connects. And you also have, I remember seeing Cyberpunk 2077, and James Ring from Super Soldier Talk had a guy on to say that it was actually a guy come back from that time period to warn humanity of what's to come if they choose that timeline of what that game depicts with, merging man with machine, Cyberpunk 2077. I remember playing it for a little bit just to, again, pick up on any messages and cues to see what I can glean. I remember one of the opening scenes in the game, there was a poster of Satan with the goat legs, the red upper body with the big horns, bending over a nun. And there was kind of like a bit of a mockery going on, like a joke in the garage in one of the opening scenes. And I was thinking, oh, wow. And it's interesting that I saw that looking back around then, because I actually encountered him twice in March of 2021, which we'll get to obviously in the next presentation. We also had another good TV series called American Gods by Neil Gaiman, based on his book, that also depicts this battle with the old gods when this shifting of the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius, governed by Saturn. Saturn obviously linked to the hexagon and the black cube and all this kind of AI, Aramanic technologies that they were doing battle with these new AI gods now on the scene, depicted as quite literally like AI manifestations as beings who can kind of like, they're very digital, that are kind of warring against the old gods. That is depicted by a character called Wednesday, who's played in that, who's meant to be the devil, which is obviously Wednesday's linked into Mercury, Rodin's day, which is linked into Thoth, which is quite interesting to kind of decode that with what's going on there with what Neil Gaiman, which is obviously all geared really towards the Judeo-Christian Kabbalah mystery schools and occult texts, that unfortunately has nothing to do with the higher level of the freedom teachings and the law of one and stuff. Okay, so but yeah, fascinating nonetheless. Obviously giving us soft disclosure as to the kind of programs they want and the timeline they want to make manifest and lock in here on this planet, that these kind of TV shows and games and movies are kind of giving us a brief snippet of. All right, and there's otherwise a famous paper that was circulating around, I think 2024, showing the kind of junk and the self-assembly of these nanobots that were found in the Jabberwockies that individuals now have in their bodies, and even unfortunately the un-Jabberwockied individuals are donning this too, which is why again it's so important to go on detox protocols, look after yourself, do the techniques, and just keep working on the solutions, and help to clear your body of all this stuff. So we basically can't escape it. It's just one of those things that we're now living in a mutated fucking planet with so much shitty technology and people even shedding and them spraying all this stuff on us, no matter where we go. So it's just a matter of taking action in order to help our bodies detoxify it and run the techniques and the energies to help defend against this kind of infiltration that is otherwise, as conduits that invade our body, can open us up energetically for infiltration with those entities that are kind of using this technology as a base to try and get in and body snatch and do everything else that they're trying to do, right? So massive responsibility until that obviously time comes where we can just get up and out of here basically, or something happens to just cleanse and purify the earth and they all go down the full timeline and we kind of stay here to kind of rebuild the kingdom, millennial kingdom, or whatever else. I think at the moment it seems like we're on an evac. Okay, so we're going back to a future timeline of where Earth had ascended. which obviously is going to be a Christic based society where none of this stuff will be there. So we'll have an opportunity then to kind of reintegrate, start healing, whether that's, being able to drop the body and go into another body up there. Probably that's what's going to happen to most of individuals. Whether you can take your body through, who knows? Ashiana talks about this at the moment, where there's a lot of gates that are going to be opening that are otherwise running a lot lower requirements for your DNA strand activation to walk through a gate. So we'll just have to wait and see how this all pans out. So yeah, it's very, very exciting, but at the same time, a bit apprehensive. But yeah, just got to do what you can do in order to, stay true and stay healthy during this mad time we're in for all these contaminants everywhere. So Pao Chang in his book Word Magic hits the nail on the head when it comes to describing this transhumanist agenda. Okay, open quote. He says, transhumanism is nothing more than the distorted version of the divine masculine energy wanting to prove to God that it can bear life without the physical body and achieve immortality without spirituality. It is left brain dominant scientists' sick way of wanting to prove to God that men can bear life without the woman. The word transhumanism means the idea that the capability of the human species can be enhanced using technology. It is the idea that by adding non-biological components to a biological system, the human body, future societies will get quantifiable results in human ability and potential. The path of transhumanism will not lead to eternal life. Instead, it will eventually lead to the near destruction of mankind. Men and women need to learn how to balance their divine masculine and divine feminine energies so they can live in harmony with one another, or they will most likely destroy themselves and their home called Earth, close quote. So we all knew the genesis of this pandemic through the transmission from a bat onto a human in a food market in Wuhan, or so the story goes. The bat symbolism is important, as in bat out of hell, often linked to the forces of darkness, except in maybe Batman's case. We also conveniently had the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which was China's first biosafety level 4 laboratory, opened in 2018, which had been an active premier research center for the study of coronaviruses. In addition, the institute had close ties with the USA, Canada, and France. The symbolism of the bat is quite interesting, where Manly P. Hall writes, open quote, nocturnal birds were appropriate symbols of both sorcery and the secret divine sciences. Sorcery because black magic cannot function in the light of truth, which is day, and is powerful only when surrounded by ignorance, represented as night. And the divine sciences because those possessing the arcana are able to see through the darkness of ignorance and materiality. Owls and bats were consequently often associated with either witchcraft or wisdom, close quote. So I actually remember during the summer picking up a chair I had bought online for my desk in the summer of 2020 when restrictions eased, and I caught whatever this thing was, which I remember it felt completely unnatural and synthetic / metallic, which led to 2 or 3 days of very weird symptoms, one of which was encountering at night. Every light I would look at, whether it be street lamps or stars, would shift to red as soon as I looked at them. And I had a strange headache that accompanied this with flu-like symptoms that felt like it was being amplified through this technology that had now entered my body and ended up in my blood-brain barrier that had obviously affected my vision somehow for this to occur. Luckily, the strange red shifting of lights only occurred for one night and my vision returned to normal the following night. So yeah, this thing certainly was not natural. And I don't know what some individuals out there are saying, like, oh, it's all fake, it's not actually a thing. Yeah, I was thinking, no, it is. It definitely is. It might be geared towards obviously targeting specific gene types, i.e. indigos. And as we saw, I think later on a few years, maybe 2022, there was like new strains coming out and they called one of them an Omicron. There was an Omicron strain. How interesting. Omicron draconians. Okay, that otherwise kind of I was picking up on at the time, thinking about, I remember hearing that in the freedom teachings when I was just studying it, just come into it. I was thinking, wow, maybe that kind of ties in with this conflict between the Anu Elohim and the fallen seraphim. The Anu Elohim behind part of this, trying to get rid of some of the genetic strains of the Omicron draconians in humans, potentially, and they're kind of letting us know through labeling this new strain that's being released. So there was certainly a lot of that going on. As you know, as we've covered with these guys, they're huge eugenicists. And there's a necessity to keep the humans on planet in order to open up the gates during the stellar activation cycles. But once all is said and done, wipe it clean out the real estate, normally through a pole reversal or pole flip, and get rid of us, and otherwise then reseed their own life forms or what they want to reseed here on the planet. But obviously, inevitably, the whole agenda got upgraded to, during this time, suck the whole planet into their phantom matrices in order to be part of their feeding system to sustain their reality, imploding reality system. So yeah, fascinating how this all was devised and how I picked up on it, and it was very discordant. And like I said, it started to mess with my optic nerves with lights, but luckily the next night it kind of fixed itself. But it certainly was not natural. It was very Metatronic, very antichristic, and technologically driven for sure. So this was a very weird experience that otherwise confirmed this very synthetic AI vibe about it, especially given the non-stop chemtrailing. Change in frequency I felt in general from March that year, and the increasingly frequent symbols of the hexagon/cube patterns I started to see proliferate throughout the hologram a lot more in anything and everything which was being designed, whether it was corporate logos, patterns on rugs, to splash guards in public urinals. I even see it to this day. It's like everywhere, the hex symbolism. Everyone's being hexed big time. I recall the drawing I etched back in the Easter of 2019, if you recall, in that ritual prior to the Notre Dame fire, that showed the zodiac and Metatron's cube at the bottom, with me circling 2020. Looking back now, I think that was definitely a warning and a huge attempt by these forces to set up shop and bring hell on earth and lock in that full timeline. Identifying and becoming aware of the type of symbol codes, patterns, and geometries we see in the hologram around us can help us read into the invisible forces that are at play within particular areas. These codes and geometries will hold the frequency pattern that is communicated into the energetic field around it, influencing anything that comes into contact or proximity with it. Yesha best describes this when talking about how that technology translates to any pattern we see imbued on matter, whether it be crop circles, carpet patterns, tattoos, wallpaper, art, etc., giving us a hint at the kind of invisible forces at play in any given area, where she says in the Forbidden Testaments of Revelation workshop, open quote, stands and codes are like a breath of specific pattern or frequency that comes up into the template, activates, spreads that frequency, and then shuts back off again. When you leave a pattern on, whether it be a carpet, wallpaper, floors, clothing, tattoos, you're saturating, you're keeping that frequency going, you're creating a breathing pattern of frequency. These codes and patterns imprint in whatever energy field they attach to. Energy is always in motion. It is not just sitting there doing nothing. It affects everything. One affects the other. You affect the energy around you, and it affects you. That's why getting pictures done of posters and hang them in your room of the Christic codes, because they broadcast and you're coding your rooms when you put them there, close quote. And again, just re-emphasizing the importance of the language of symbolism, right? That's taught to everyone in the mystery schools, and even now what I was picking up on naturally, symbols are everywhere, and symbols are so important because it literally encodes and amplifies your template and what you will then align with, which is why it's so dangerous, the occult, because it plugs you into venerating all these fallen trees of life, daisy of death, or bloom of doom, as they call them, the fib of Nochi, spiral mathematics, the yin and yang, finite and tropic, eating vampiric, Metatronic harness nets, the tube torus fields with the Fermi bubble and the buckyball, Buckminster Fuller geometries, all of this stuff that's proliferated with the occult and under science with the occult especially is all aligning those individuals, and they all get the tattoos of it and stuff like this, and posters and logos on their tops, yoga mats. They don't understand. It's literally helping them to align with the black hole fall. It's so ridiculous. But there you go. Maybe that's a lesson for those of us who are awake down here to learn of the knowledge of evil and how much of a retarded place this planet actually is and has become. I'm just most often beside myself, like just how well they've devised this and dumbed everyone down with their technologies is quite astonishing. But at the same time, it's not, because they are cowards and they have to do what they do to us to stop us waking up, because they know if we do, then we can steer this ship into much more Christic eternal life waters. So they're only powerful over controlled fragments and amnesiac versions of ourselves, okay, that otherwise really does truly show that they're the ones who are cowards, they're the ones who are powerless. And I think in the art of war, they're showing their strength when they're the most weakest, because they know the time is short and they're going to be cut off forever with whatever they're left with when all is said and done, and they're going to be returning the space dust, no legacy. So I'm calling their bluff, right? And that's why you have to, when understanding this, call their bluff. They've got no clothes on, Emperor's got no clothes on, and they're otherwise showing strength when they absolutely have none. Right, so there's no need to fear these guys. And even if I do get dragged down, I'll be at peace knowing that I've done my absolute best, and I'll continue to do my absolute best to not bow to them and prove that they are cowards and they're powerless and they're just fools, in my opinion, that has no legacy. And I would happily go down with them and try and cause as much ruckus and still see the truth and spread the truth as best I can within a phantom reality matrix zone, right? As we are in kind of pretty much a phantom reality zone at the moment in the semi-fallen system, in order to be a constant reminder of who they are: utter cowards, utter idiots, fools, no legacy, arrogant, narcissistic, the otherwise arrogant, narcissistic fools, right? That have no respect from me, and they demand it non-stop all the time. They use all these technologies and philosophies to try and make us feel guilty, ashamed, and fearful. When really, you got to call their bluff. Honestly, you have to call their bluff. And so yeah, I mean, I wish to go back to eternal life ascension organically, fully remembering all parts of myself and bringing them all back together, consciously speaking, rather than falling. But hey, my higher self, I trust. It really, for me, to come into a system and expose the lies is very satisfying for me, which is how I've been made and coded. That I kind of get thrills and joys off of exposing these guys and going up against them. And for me, it's almost like confirmation that I'm doing a good job whenever I'm getting hit with frequency, hurled, and attacked, prodded, and all the things that they've been doing to me, heckling all the time, and all these Agent Smiths coming up, and even invisibly, a lot of energy wars with what's being flung with me, dream experiences. That's confirmation for me that I'm doing my job right, and I come here, and it kind of gives me that satisfaction that I know that I'm irritating these guys, and that there's going to be someone here to know what they've done, and that they've got no legs to stand on. They literally have no spine, no legs, and they are spineless, they're legless subspecies of abominations of entities that just need to be returned to space dust, because they are just mutated pieces of consciousness that are too far gone, that have just lost it, and they're irritating to me, right? Which is a good sign for me, again, because it's just like everything and anything that's associated with them, philosophically, ideologically, geometrically, is just resistance, this natural kind of repulsion from me, as if like two poles of a magnet are put together. It's just impossible, right? So yeah, anyway, so I carry on in my book. I write, thus, I surmise that my increased frequent observations of the hexagon and carbon geometry post-corona was a result of the fallen AI Metatronic energies attaching to the minds of many individuals who helped to proliferate this pattern when it came to interior/exterior designs, fashion, tattoos, and logos. And so another interesting fact that I found as well with my research is that a lot of this technology in EMF radiation, these parasites and fungus, which are organic organisms, absolutely thrive off of and love and can be activated and amped up. And this is something I definitely come to experience with this kind of hybrid fungal infection that I developed as a result of my attacks that happened towards the end of 2020, which we'll go into soon. So you can see, yeah, I've done a course on fungal parasite infections, and it's definitely a major problem that could be the root cause for a lot of people's degenerative behavior and chronic illness symptoms. They literally can alter one state of mind and has been linked with mental illness. And they got a few comments of individuals off this little video. I went plant-based after being sick for years and began with an 18-day fast. During this fast, as the parasites of candida died off, I felt demons leave my body. I also found myself to be free from addictions which had plagued me my entire life. Parasites as antennae for negative entities. Yes, that makes a lot of sense. The cleaner we are, the less stuff there is to latch onto. Fruits, distilled water, plus liquids and fasting. These types of videos and information are super fascinating to me, and appreciate you to delve in further into these topics. They got castor oil, pure gum, turpentine. Spirits of turpentine are powerful antiparasitic as well. There's many antiparasitics. You also have wormwood, funny enough, which is a root, and you also have chlorine dioxide, which is another good one that I use. That's my go-to in order to help cleanse, that I kind of use pretty much on and off ever since when I came across it in 2021, in order to help me with what I was going through at the time, which helps to get rid of all the heavy toxins of the metals, of the pathogens, and also the parasites and fungus too. Okay, but yeah, there's plenty of remedies out there. And this guy's comment was quite interesting. Since 1975, I've been an RN and have specialized in colon hydrotherapy since 2004. Clinical experience has taught me that 7 out of 10 people have parasites. Wi-Fi feeds parasites, and most people walk around with a phone on their body. Parasites have the ability to capture our palates and demand that we deliver their fuel, basically carbs. Parasites have the ability to identify any agent being used against them, change their own DNA, and become resistant within 5 to 7 days. That's a term in biology called pleomorphism. Mothers in the 1930s knew that you deworm your horses, cows, cats, dogs, and children. Every fall and spring, kids would have to drink castor oil, molasses, diatomaceous earth, and wormwood. Every culture internationally has been parasite cleansing, using herbal mixture passed down from grandmothers. That ceased in the USA sometime in the 1950s when the mantra "parasites are a third world nation" issue was indoctrinated into the public psyche. This has never been true, but has an agenda behind it. Parasitology and fungal pathology were taken out of core curriculum in most med schools around 1979, when pharma began to endow med schools. The kids go into med school indoctrinated with that mantra consider, I'm not going into infectious disease or tropical medicine. I don't need those courses. We now have 2 generations of doctors who never consider that symptoms could be caused by parasites and fungus, and they can cause just about any symptom and enter into every physiological system, right? And that's something I came to encounter, and it's a huge weaponized organism that has been used on this planet, which obviously links into the exposure to radiation that actually helps to amplify them, switch them on and off, that they kind of thrive in that kind of energetic environment too. Okay, so huge problem that we need to address and that we used to know. That obviously, yeah, again, showing under this new world order, the agendas afoot in order to suppress us, keep our frequency low, and unlock and administer and amplify these kind of technologies, even at a biological level, with these entities, right, in our bodies in the form of parasites and fungus to help drain our energy. So I'm going to get into my experiences now. So the bat symbolism is very important, as I not only picked up on it in other things I was viewing throughout the year, like in the case with Gregory David Hallett claiming to be the King of England, with a few obvious bat symbolisms put into cutscenes and a few snippets I saw. That was just a consciousness trap, right? There's so many of them. That's why people get plugged and sucked into these arguments and the hopium, right? The false hopium, right? Oh, there's going to be a guy that's going to change it. It all takes us away from ourselves of being able to look in the mirror and be the change we wish to see, right? Do the inner work, do the shadow work, come into the knowledge of the truth, the knowledge of evil, okay? Because until you know evil, you know nothing. So, yeah, there was a few scenes in the snippets that I saw, the bat symbolism from this idiot, Gregory David Hallett, and the crew. Otherwise, showing me what they were aligned with and used as a distraction. But I had a bat one night around what must have been end of August, beginning of September time, squeak and chirp outside my bedroom window for a good 5 minutes as I was finishing an email. We normally get bats this time of year flying around at dusk, but I never heard a bat this close to the window before and chirping this frequently, which kind of lured me to the window. As I finished the email and shut down my computer to come over to the window to check where this bat was and close the curtains to get ready for bed, the noise stopped, and I immediately noticed there was this light in a bedroom window from another property that backed onto ours. And you can see there on the top left hand corner of the slide, that's the photograph I took from my vantage point of my room, zoomed in slightly, of this house that kind of backed onto, there was a house next to us in the estate that had a tennis court, and it's kind of facing the tennis court. But otherwise, yeah, you can see directly from my bedroom window into their bedroom, which is kind of like up in the attic where the window is. And this is otherwise an image taken after that event, but I would have like many weird lights going on and off, as I referenced before, that I was picking up on ever since my November 2018 Cannon Hill trip, with these weird lights and even beings kind of popping in and out of reality as well, with like this sense of being watched all the time. So this light is very similar to the lights and beings I saw at Notre Dame Fire that time through the TV, and had the same resonance, look and feel to the orbs I encountered in Cannon Hill Woods, albeit not as intense, except it was like a flashlight that was being held by someone who was invisible, which was shining its light onto the tennis court that backs onto the property from another house. I admit I was quite startled by the light. It was somewhat like a moth to a flame, observing this light that would momentarily shine on the tennis court and then appear to withdraw inside the room with many flashes and angle changes, albeit more faintly, before shining outside again. It did this a few times before it shone its light across my bedroom window from left to right in a swooping motion, similar to what I'd observed at Notre Dame fire TV coverage. If you recollect those beings that kind of had like their whole body, they were stood upright, but many of their heads were like full of light. But then at times they kind of like projected light as if there was like a torch, like they were a torch. And it was accompanied with like red flashes as well. So it's similar to that, but it was otherwise the being was invisible, but holding this kind of light device that would then project every now and again, similar to these beings that saw their heads being able to project the light. So it was quite a strong light that made me blink a few times to adjust my eyesight again. It did this for the second time, and then on the third time, I had a reaction which did not feel good. So I retreated, closed the window, and drew the curtains, as I immediately knew it was like an ill light, right? And started to have visceral convulsions for around 10 to 15 minutes, as it felt like it had attacked and messed with my solar plexus and chakra, subtle body anatomy. So I had to do some heavy breath work to control myself. It's quite literally, I felt like my bowels were going to evacuate and I was having these spasms in my abdomen. I managed to get things under control, went to bed that night, but what followed for the next 2 months, no joke, were outright attacks with energy weapons, frequency attacks, black magic, that forced me out of body with experiences and just lots of weird paranormal stuff, okay, around the house. The house I was staying at was on some ley lines which had a huge Lebanese cedar tree out the front that later got struck by lightning and killed in 2022, right on Jubilee, the Queen's Jubilee weekend, funny enough, on a Saturday night, due to the ongoing grid wars there and attempts to snuff me out that we will get to. The house was an old Victorian mansion that was later split in two to become semi-detached. We had a cellar on our side of the house that had an archway and passage completely bricked over that was claimed to have been underground tunnels linking the Wimborne Minster in the town centre with the Freemasonic Lodge. That was a stone's throw away from the Minster. I'll go into the next presentation. I'll show you like the maps with things that I experienced, because that's through that church is where I encountered Satan for the first time. Marduk Satan, right, as depicted in Hollywood. There was a coach house in an old lane that had also been cut off from the new boundary lines to the property that led down the back of the newly built houses, where it joined another driveway which led into Wimborne, which would have housed horses and carts from out of town coming by to drop off goods for the market, as Wimborne was an old market town. So the house itself had a lot of history to it and salience in regards to the grids and the connection to the Freemasons. Okay, the Freemasonic Lodge was called Cuthberger, St. Cuthberger, and our street was called Cuthberger, and our house was linked to basically Cuthberger House. So it was all connected with these underground passageways and the grids, and that tree was otherwise over a rare crystal earth gem cave. There was all these crystal gems underneath it, which meant to me that it was an important site that helped to house and run energies with the ley line system. All I can say about the following 2 months was pretty mental, was that it was like I was in battle with a schizo demon who was trying to split my consciousness in two. That's pretty much how I can sum it up. The series of events that unfolded started with these pernicious attacks I would get during the night, where I would encounter knocks and noises just before drifting off to sleep to prevent me from getting to sleep, to intense energies that would be very unsettling and hurled at me, to just general unease that would subside but still persist throughout the day and amplify at night. I remember one time, after a hideous night of being hurled and whacked with frequencies with very little sleep, I woke up and went to walk downstairs, but had this itch at the back of my head. So I stood at the top of the stairs and stopped to itch it. And as soon as I went to itch it, a blue and black butterfly flew out from the back of my head over my shoulder, okay, which is exactly the same as a Ulysses butterfly only found in Australia and Indonesia. As you can see there, the image, it's the exact same butterfly that flew out from the back of my head. Manly P. Hall writes that the Hermeticists, acknowledging that departure of evil spirits from the body can take the form of a bird or insect, open quote. Sometimes the evil spirits enter the patient at the bidding of someone desiring to injure him. In these cases, the physician commanded the spirits to return to the one who sent them. It is recorded that in some instances that the evil spirits departed through the mouth in the form of clouds of smoke, sometimes from the nostrils as flames. It is even averred that the spirits might depart in the form of birds and insects. Close quote. As soon as the butterfly left my head, it fluttered down the stairs and sat on a step near the first floor. My room was in the attic, and paused for a moment, then set off and swooped down between the banisters toward the ground floor. So I quickly ran downstairs to follow and see where it went, and it completely disappeared, as there was nowhere it could have gone apart from the corridor, as the other doors were closed. What was interesting is that my mother had a frame of a real captured butterfly hung in the lounge room, with one of them being this Ulysses butterfly. Okay, could it have been that exact one that I saw, or existed completely independent from that? Or was it a holographic insert? It was very symbolic either way, and very weird to witness. And it kind of, people obviously know and heard about MK Ultra and the Monarch program with the Monarch butterfly, which all goes into like psychological manipulation. That certainly seems to be the theme. But whether it was like a spirit that I encountered, possibly, like I said, it felt like an external entity that was kind of battling, that was trying to split my consciousness in two, and I was up against it. I was having to, obviously, thank goodness, I kind of been prepared with those challenging entheogen experiences I had prior that we went through, with Cannon Hill, the Easter Notre Dame, and then November 2019 with the New Forest experience that kind of prepped me for encountering these ill energies and the evil entities. That got me through without a doubt. And like I said, I've just got this tenacity, and I didn't give up, and drew on my experiences and wisdom, not only from the experiences that I had in the previous years, but also probably from previous lives, in order to just with affirmations, spell work within my mind's eye, speaking to myself, amplifying my fields, visualizing being bathed in colors, especially white, gold, pink, and silver, which actually then, obviously, as I later found out in the teachings, is linked into the fail-safe kind of currents and energies, linked into the eternal creation domains, especially. So it massively helped me. And I relocated. I went away for about 2 or 3 weeks up in the Lake District with my old man, which did help, but I kind of had a lot of it still follow me up there that I was battling, but kind of diminished by maybe 30 to 40%. Then I came back, and so I was creative in my imagination in order to help dispel, especially during the night and before going to bed and stuff, to just heal me and just to keep going on and keep trucking through, and knowing that this too will pass. Keep telling myself, and just doing putting a to-do list just every day, just do a little thing, and just keep my mind occupied and try not to focus on this infiltration attempt that's going on, and just keep myself anchored in body and no mind strength, and just do these regular techniques, with my imagination, affirmation, and visualization. That was very powerful. That got me through this attack, right? As you can see here, Matrix 4 in this movie, these are cutscenes, okay, with the cat, and in the background, look at the butterfly, blue and black, and the butterfly down there, that's the architect, played by that character, and over the shoulder there is Keanu Reeves playing Neo. That was re-assimilated in the Matrix off the back of Matrix 3, where the architect, because Neo's starting to have bleed-throughs again, that where am I, what's going on, what is this reality, I know this isn't the real reality, etc. That the architect is his psychiatrist, right, and therapist, in order to help dismiss and disclaim and run that whole plausible deniability that he is actually back in the Matrix, and that you're fine, you're just going through these delusions, you have a history of your family, and making up all this bullshit basically to try and keep him trapped within the Matrix, that the architect is taking upon himself to kind of work with suppressing Neo, because Neo is obviously a very powerful consciousness, that goes into JC, right, Jesus Christ. If you connect it in with the Terminator, with how basically the Matrix and the Terminator are written by the same individual, and the Matrix is set after the events of what happened in the Terminator with Skynet, and then everyone, obviously the machines taking over everyone and then assimilating everyone within what the Matrix now depicts as being the machine worlds in the Matrix, using them as energy to feed off of. That obviously John Connor was assimilated but ends up becoming Neo, right, in the movie The One. So the machine sent back a Terminator back in time, which is what we see happen in Terminator, to try and kill John Connor's mum and John Connor himself, before he gets assimilated, and obviously does what he did to dismantle the Matrix. Okay, so very interesting that even here, this symbology that I was picking up on, and I watched this after I had what happened to me done, right, which was, I think, in 2021 this was released, or 2022. That was after the event of me having this butterfly fly out from the back. That it was like very subtle imagery and kind of telling me that I was picking up on, that is linked with this kind of these entities and technologies and psychological manipulation, right, in order to try and keep you in the trap of the Matrix. So yeah, very, very interesting. Now what you see in the bottom left is the first out-of-body experience that I had that was very lucid, of seeing an entity that was very similar to what you see here, that was more closely aligned with probably, I think I write in the book, the second from the left on the bottom, right? It's kind of got like a brown color to it, but all of them are pretty similar, right? That I was basically lucid in the study where I did most of my work at the front of the house on the ground floor, and I felt like I'd been drugged, like date raped, but I was just coming back around. So, right, this is in the dreamscape and the astrals. And so I knew I was in the house, and I knew where I was, and all of a sudden I was coming around a bit groggy, and I see these two women sat down on the chairs by my desk talking, and I'm just there, and all of a sudden, like, just phasing in, coming into my astral body, and I go, what's going on? And they kind of like looked at me, and then they kind of went back to each other, whispered something, and one of them said, "Oh, come here, child, don't worry, come here." I said, what's going on? Who are you? Like, really confused. And she was like, "There's no need to worry, child. There's no need to worry. Come here." And I took a few steps closer towards her. I asked her, "Who are you? What are you doing?" And I had all these questions, and she didn't take kindly to it. And she just kind of like, when I kind of clocked and realized that these entities weren't, nice, she kind of like lowered her head and looked up at me from the seat down through her brows and had this like sinister grin. And it's in that moment, just innately, I said, "In the name of my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, I expel you from this house." And so as soon as I said that first phrase with Jesus Christ, she got up, and the woman who was with her got up, and they both all of a sudden walked towards the wall and was just facing the wall. All the while, there was a third person who was a man, a male, who was kind of walking back and forth the front porch of the house, whilst these two witches are kind of, I write in my book, and at the time kind of looked and felt like they were maybe witches, right? That this other man was just walking back and forth too. He wasn't really affected with the first thing I said, but these two witches like immediately shot up and then turned and then just faced the wall. So I said it the second time. I said, "In the name of my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, I expel you from this house." And they started hissing. And after the second time of me saying that, the guy who was walking back and forth came in, stopped, and his image changed to be exactly what you see here, how these demons are depicted, which is kind of commonly illustrated in medieval artwork and art pieces. So his form that he was donning was obviously a shape-shifting form to disguise himself as a human male. That then, after the second time of me mentioning, "In the name of my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, I expel you from this house," these two witches started hissing, and his form, it revealed his true form, okay, which was this demonic character. So after seeing that, I said it for the third time. I said, "In the name of my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, I expel you from this house." And then as I said that, all of them just bolted right out the front door. And I said it another time and just followed them as I said this and saw them walk all the way down the end of the driveway and then out of sight as they disappeared. And then I woke up, right? And so I was thinking, wow. And this was all during like, my attacks and stuff that were going on. That my higher self, I had a lot of weird experiences. And because given where I was with the house and what that house was connected into with the grids, with the energies there, I was able to be a lot easier in having these kind of out of body experiences. And prior to that, obviously, before they kind of activated the switch of the 5G in March 2020, I was able to really get into, the astral and connect to my higher self, get a lot of downloads and insights. That something was done to obviously kind of buffer that. And obviously, as a result of actually what triggered the light attack, it could have been, I'm not too sure, but what happened a week prior to that, I actually sent out a huge packet of status correction papers that I did off the back of Bibi Bacchus's course, and I sent it to the Vatican, the UN, all of the major departments of government in the UK, which obviously had my address on there with where I was staying at Cuthberger and Wimborne in this house. And so I kind of was like, it was a big, F you to the system. I know what you guys are doing. I want none, any part of it. I want to reclaim my sovereignty and, start that process. I thought, fuck it, I was going to send it all out. Huge packet. I think it was like over maybe 18 recipients, and yeah, a week later I then have this show up at my house. So I was kind of put on the map. Whether that would have still happened if I didn't send out those status correction papers, I can only speculate, but it was timely indeed. And it was kind of war started, the battle really started, and it's still ongoing. and I'm still being hunted, but just again dived in the deep end and learned the lessons of the defense against the dark arts, and I had to very quickly in order to keep myself sane and conscious and stable and centered during this time, obviously, which, kind of revealed the reason why I'm here. Make me wiser and stronger, because whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? So I had to adapt, and I'm constantly adapting, and they're adapting too. There's different flavors and frequencies and things that I pick up on and the way they get to me, but I'm adapting with that as well. But very interesting that I had my first proper lucid out of body experience at that house after the attacks and during the attacks, after the main light attack. And there was a few others. That wasn't the only one. I write more in depth in my book, but that was the main one. And interestingly, it just innately I referred to referencing in the name of my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And for them hearing that word, Jesus Christ, they absolutely hated it. And that's what made the demon expose himself and the two witches that are with him hiss and like headbutt the wall, kind of malfunctioning. So it seemed to be very powerful. And I write about this because I had a few other experiences where I used the name of Jesus Christ to good effect, but other times where it just had no effect, and otherwise had to rely on other means in which to, get myself out of precarious situations in the astrals and stuff. And also one time where I used the blood, which is quite recently, actually in 2024. So yeah, how that ties in with the three Christ story, obviously threw a bit of a spanner in the works, but I, theorize and write about this later on in my book, which I'll get to in the presentations, whilst trying to keep a scientific mind, right, with what that's aligned to in regards to, if you recollect, the three Christ story, with the MCO teachings claim that the one that was crucified was otherwise just a character to cover up the story and the movements of J9, especially with the Anu Elohim, but also J12, with what they were teaching with the Templar, Stargates, Ascension Mechanics, history, technologies, races, and agendas, that this guy Arahabi was used in order to, be crucified to cover up the tracks with the Catholic draconian mob, and so yeah, was resurrected by the Anu Elohim through holographic inserts and their means to be able to perform miracles, right? And so he was kind of then used as an external savior figure. But I was thinking, wow, I've had these experiences of using the name and even the blood one time. And so, yeah, that kind of opened up a bit of a can of worms that I'll go into later. But otherwise, very interesting that innately, like I said, when we look at solutions to problems, for me, as I had that first-hand experience and saw their reactions, I thought it's a tool, it's a weapon. Why not use it? Okay, I may not know the full details of the ins and outs as to why that name was so powerful and how it plugs into, these different stories we're hearing of the MCO teachings, especially with the three Christ story, but it works. Okay, and that's the whole point of what I kind of, write about and share with my experience. Without the kind of politics behind it, it worked. Okay, so it helped get me out of that precarious situation. It seemed to be the theme with me being in that house all throughout 2021 as well, was kind of reclaiming other multidimensional aspects of myself that we'll get to in the next presentation, where I was in these kind of precarious situations and having to, rely on certain tools and methods in order to, save the day, as it were, for that part of myself, I guess, that was maybe in these precarious situations that my higher self, it felt like, was kind of positioning me and to put me in order to address certain issues that I was capable to address as well. And so there was another time in the house as well, again, that was out of body, and I knew there was an entity knocking around in the bathroom, and I was the other side of the bathroom through the wall. I was whispering truth, and as I kept repeating it, it kept vibrating the molecules in the walls in the astrals of that room, and the bellowing of truth was then amplified into that room and actually acted to get the entity to flee, which is quite interesting. So I had like a load of weird experiences like that. Obviously, I won't go into too much detail on these presentations, but write about it in more depth in my book. So the underworld. So I had another experience, right? So upon returning from my trip away, this was to the Lake District, it was fast approaching Halloween, which coincided with an experience I had again out of body in the astrals, fully lucid and conscious, where I had suddenly appeared outside an old mate's house about a mile away, whose stepdad had been living and had sadly taken his own life around 2 years prior. I'd heard of this maybe a year beforehand, though through other people, but had no ties with them anymore, as this was back in middle school, around the ages of 13 to 16, when I was playing for the local footy team that he used to coach, and where I would also hang out at the house, crash, have parties when the parents weren't in with the mates, etc. I was stood outside the house and immediately recognized where I was. He then came out, this was obviously in the astrals, right? He then came out the house looking all pale and probably exactly like how they found him. I immediately knew where I was and what was going on in regards to being in some kind of in-between place or underworld, i.e. the lower dimensional planes from the normal Cathara grid that may go into some of the black hole reality fields, okay, or maybe, the lower astrals. So he walked out and I kind of gave him a big hug because I knew where I was, who he was, and where he was in regards to hearing about his suicide and that he was kind of betwixt and stuck in between dimensions and not in a good place, basically, and needed to move on. He then invited me into the house. As I walked through the house, I could see all these empty and half-drunk bottles of alcohol everywhere, with the house also stinking of booze. The place probably looked similar to how he left it, and now he was stuck here in this plane. Whether he knew where he was or not, I'm not sure, but we proceeded to the lounge room where we sat down and started talking. He was reminiscing about me as a boy playing for the footy team he used to manage, and I was recollecting some of my memories of him and sharing. I noticed he had the TV on and there was a rugby game playing which had an interruption that caught my attention due to someone's head being decapitated in a scrum. This otherwise captured quite well the frequency of this place I was in, as it had this underlying frequency of more death about it. I then started noticing that the house was conveniently located next to a bottle shop where he would go to get his booze and continue the cycle he was seeing when he's stuck in of alcoholism and drowning his sorrows, feeding his depression that led to him taking his own life. So basically overdosed with drugs and alcohol. I interrupted him after realizing this and said along the lines of, this is all too convenient. That bottle shop, the alcohol, you have to stop this. This isn't good for you. This place, you have to move on. I was very adamant. I knew why I kind of had this experience. I was trying to help him to realize where he was to, move on, leave this behind. You're dead. You have to let go. Well, as soon as I said that, he didn't take too kindly to that comment, and he stood up from his chair and proceeded to walk toward me, pointing a finger, getting all aggressive and defensive. And this is when I was pulled back and I woke up. Now, remember, as I woke up, I had a very sore ache and uneasy feeling at the back of my head that lasted about 30 minutes as I was processing what just happened. And being around Halloween, obviously in Scorpio season, again, it is said the veil is at its thinnest. Okay, it seems to me, given the whole regalia surrounding this supposed holy day, otherwise referred to as All Hallows Day, All Saints Day, with the spiders, ghosts, witches, demonic creatures, etc., that the planes in which the veil becomes the thinnest, two are the lower planes associated with the black hole fall, 10 Sephiroth phantom dimensions of existence, and possibly other full systems that are connected to it, like with the we say systems or the Borgia matrix as well. So also with the alignments that happen around equinoxes, it also opens up portals to our parallel system that has fully fallen as well. Okay, so they come from here, there, and everywhere basically. So it seems the veil, even when the sun has slipped due to precessional slippage, aligns with portal passages, probably from inorganic wormhole networks in the tropical astrological net around Earth that will always have Scorpio season start at October 21st and end on November 21st, with the Theakis wedged in there at some point. Interesting to note, we have Valentine's Day occurring on the 14th of February every year, which would no doubt coincide with more conceptions to bring those babies being born 10 months later, or 9 months later, to fall within the bands of Scorpio around November 14th. Needless to say, after that event, and given everything that was going on for the prior 2 months, I decided to go see someone spiritual so I could seek counsel as to what's going on and what's happening to me and why I'm having all these experiences and being targeted so much. So I booked in to have a chakra cleanse and realignment session done with someone who was a witch/shaman who I heard about through Crowley Jr. It wasn't for another month before I could see her, as she was fully booked, but it was an interesting session to say the least. Prior to the appointment, I remember having a very vivid dream where I was all of a sudden lucid in this dream experience inside a laboratory in a queue of people waiting to be vaccinated by these two guys in lab coats with masks and gloves on, where these individuals would get vaccinated, then head over to another bench where they put on this backpack and headphones and say, "Yay, I'm connected to the internet." I then looked behind me and could see the queue of people run out the door. I was about the fourth person from the lab rats jabbing people, observing all this going on. It's quite incredible in the lucid astral dream experience. As soon as it got to me and they waved for me to come forward, I stuck out my hands. I said, "No way, you're not coming anywhere near me with that needle." And they both looked at each other momentarily and just waved me to one side and carried on with the rest of the line, kind of waving the next person along, and they're just kind of like lemmings, saying, "Yeah, yeah." let's go. I stood back and continued watching this go on, where people were getting vaccinated, going to this next bench along the line and putting on a backpack that looked like something out of Ghostbusters, and then these headphones where they would then say, "Yay, I'm connected to the internet." I was astonished. I then proceeded to follow these vaccinated backpack and headphone wearing lemmings out of the room and outside of this facility I was in and onto the beach in which this facility was located right next to. I remember seeing a silo in the distance with Japanese kanji on the side and thought I was in either Japan or China. These people were walking toward the beach to join others who formed these ranks you would otherwise see in army parades. There were quite a lot of them in these blocks all lined up, and in the distance I started to see a black mass in the sky come toward us that first looked like dark clouds, but as it got nearer I could see it was a swarm of small black insect looking nanobots. This swarm came right over the people, all queued up on the beach, and descended down and flew into each and every one of them, after which I woke up. And I just remember thinking, God, they are even jabbing people with this mRNA technology in the astrals with their astral bodies. I thought it was quite a fitting example of this transhumanist takeover attempt that was underway on Earth, and probably most of the Milky Way galaxy, with this whole Metatronic antichristic AI technology being used to take over the minds and trap the souls of many into the black hole full timeline in this end times drama. Yeah, so that was quite a telling and interesting experience, given everything that was going on that we saw out picture on the Earth. That was also happening in the higher dimensions. That was just, yeah, like I said, astonishing. Like, very lucky that my higher self, again, I was just kind of like put in that position. Again, you've got to make sure you got to look after yourself here because you're about to be vaccinated in the astrals. And so I was put consciously in that position. I was like, no. I know what's going on here. No, I know what I'm connected into. I know what's going on. You ain't touching me. And they couldn't. It wasn't as if they then kind of like forced to get me and pin me down and then injected me. It's like that free will was respected, which is astonishing to witness. But I don't think it's difficult, isn't it? Because I think with the indigo hunts and stuff, like it's not my will to be hunted and have like all this discordant energy here, but their free will, they're still allowed to, hunt people who would otherwise express their free will in an opposite way of not wanting to consent for them to doing what they do, but they're fallen. They've already, sinned. They've already gone against and violated many universal laws. So to them, it's kind of like your free will is just bargained for and they don't really care. But at some levels that it is respected because it's obviously, I guess it invokes intervention on your behalf by your higher selves and divine will and those beings that are kind of connected into that. That certainly does help with preserving your free will and making sure that that is honoured rather than abused by these fallen guys who wouldn't really respect it. But under universal law, I think it invokes that protection and allows you to be in those situations that you can take control and be accountable and responsible of your own soul consciousness to navigate this kind of maze that we're in, right? This fallen system. So as a result of the attacks over the months, and then messing with my solar plexus in the initial attack with the light, I developed a systemic fungal infection, which led to heart palpitations every 30 seconds or so for a good 2 weeks before I decided to get the doctor to have a look. What was interesting to observe was this transition from these forces trying to split my mind in two to now focusing on trying to get me to have a heart attack with these heart palpitations as a result of me having this fungal infection and it excreting its mycotoxins, which was obviously, hindering my nervous system and my heart's ability to kind of fire properly in sequence. I realized after this event how black magic works, as in the hologram around me were all these subtle signs of broken hearts and heart attacks, heart operations, etc. For instance, an ornament in the house hung on a door in the shape of a heart smashed one time when my mother came through the door whilst I was there. A mate I had not heard from in over 8 years reached out to me on Facebook about a week prior, where we had a very brief catch up, to randomly send me a message showing a video of an open heart surgery he was watching on a TV in veterinary school. As you can see there, I've got literal proof screenshotted during this whole time of me having my heart palpitations, right, and this kind of going on and me trying to fix this issue. You can see he sent me this image and video of open heart surgery. And it's just out of the blue, just all of a sudden, hey, how you doing, mate? What's going on? I briefly reply, and then the next message he sends, it's of him doing a open heart surgery just when I was going through trying to, resolve and remedy my heart issues myself. So that's how black magic works, so subtle, and it can work through all these individuals too, to come into to try and get you to create your own demise, basically. There were also countless ads and references to heart attacks or heart disease that I was picking up on in the hologram during this time. That was evidently uncanny and engineered. They often target the heart frequency attacks as well, which is not pleasant. They were trying to seed in my subconscious my own demise through heart attack symbolism and hoping I would feed it enough until it became my reality. I recognized this straight away and fed no energy toward it, believing I would find the cause and heal. But it was otherwise a very shocking and sobering realization that they can work through anyone, just like the agents portrayed in the Matrix movies, in order to create anxiety, friction, unease, and in my case, a heart attack. I was even picking up on things such as the packaging to the popcorn machine we had. Yeah, this is mad, which seemed to always coincide with a horrible night's sleep when eating the popcorn from this machine. Even though the kernels were organic, that read on the package on a movie sign. So on the package, I remember when I had like 2 or 3 nights of having like really bad night's sleeps after having this popcorn. And I just got this nudge to look at the package, the packaging of the popcorn that we had in the shed, and I dug it out and had a look, and it read like it was like a outdoor cinema, old style cinema sign that read on there, Night of the Demon Popcorn. So when you understand how spells work, when imbuing certain items with intent, that is designed to speak to your subconscious and unconscious parts of self and the energetic template, a whole world of hidden symbolism and spells open up to you everywhere, which was otherwise portrayed very well in the movie They Live. Okay, which you can see there. When you put the glasses on, you'll see these entities that otherwise aren't human, and behind all the advertising billboards and signs are these symbols and the subtle subliminal messaging of, obey, consume, stay asleep, etc. So advertising and marketing are experts in black magic, creating a false need for you to feel, manipulating the mind. Think of how many celebrities and politicians are doing the same. And all these logos, right? Logos goes into the word, the sound tones, the silent vibrations, to these dead corpse orations, right? Corporations. What's an oration? To orate is to speak again. That most people unconsciously support, where most are completely unethical and offer zero real value in your life apart from cheap dopamine hits and superficial ego boosts matched with an obnoxious sense of pride and purpose. So going to get my heart checked out with the doctor, they hooked me up to an ECG, which read a T-wave inversion ECG, which is completely abnormal. And they actually thought the machine was broken. So asked me to come back in the following week. So within that time, I'd noticed my diet had changed quite significantly, with me consuming a lot more sugar than normal, with little things such as pouring lots of honey over my oats in the morning, going for more carbs in my meals where I wouldn't have before, and consuming a lot more treats that I normally wouldn't have been taking. All signs of a fungal and parasite infection. As you recollect, they can control our palate, which is basically our apostat center, these parasites and fungus, which makes us crave more of what they love, which is carbohydrates. So I went along for my second appointment, and the same reading appeared, and the doctor looked horrified. Of course, with her mask on and keeping 6 feet away, never forget it, wherein I tried to explain to her about how I think it is a result of a fungal infection due to the stress I had been under and noticeable diet changes that had crept in, mostly unawares, until I realized prior to the appointment, and she obviously just backwards engineering it and using your logic, right? It was quite evident it was a fungal issue, a parasite issue. But she downplayed that as being the cause, because she obviously isn't educated in it, and referred me to see a specialist in order to investigate further with cardiograms and MRIs, etc. So I came back home thinking these doctors have absolutely no clue about fungal parasite infections, which is one of the most overlooked causes of many diseases in the body, and decided to fast for 3 days and consciously change my diet to an antifungal diet. Well, after 3 days, the palpitations completely disappeared and never came back. And they hooked me up on a otherwise 3-day ECG monitor, which came back normal, and did a cardiogram, which showed absolutely no structural damage whatsoever. Right. So in brief, I fixed myself. And off the back of this, I did a holistic therapy course with Paul Chek at the Chek Institute, which gave me, and there was a specialist course on parasites and fungus especially, that gave me all the weapons I needed in terms of knowledge to start building a better relationship with my body and allow my body to heal and at least deal with the stresses of all this attention I was getting for all these attacks and what had been done to me, which also goes into me being followed up with a specialist. I went to see the consultant, and he was like pressuring me to otherwise have an MRI scan done. That otherwise it was a very odd appointment because he didn't look human either. So he had like one real giant left eye and one really withered right eye, which kind of symbolic of the Dajjal. And individuals linked into the real, or like the satanic depictions of the Dajjal, right, in the Islamic texts. And so he was like, oh, you should get an MRI just in case. Obviously the cardiogram looks fine and your ECG is fine, but we can look at more deeper structures. I was kind of reluctant because I knew I don't want to put myself in this situation, and because you look dodgy, mate, I'm not really too sure. But I went ahead with it later on, I think around, I guess, March or April time of 2021, where I got this done, which we'll get to in the timeline. But otherwise, that was also another infiltration attempt with what they injected me with the last so-called dye, right, which is phonetically similar to die that you have to sign before going in there. I was thinking, what am I doing in this like massive electromagnetic machine being pumped full of all kinds of weird energies? The last dye that they injected me with was something else from the previous 3 dyes that outpictured for the next 6 months of all kinds of weird symptoms, but skin crawling sensations at night, right? So they injected me with some kind of like parasite, which kind of merged with the fungal issue that I already had. So it kind of felt like ever since then I've got this like hybrid fucking nanotech fungus parasite infection in me. That is a bit of a bitch that kind of they use tech frequency to activate and kind of shut off, that I've been having to deal with ever since then. I got to a point where I kind of controlled it, but it's difficult to fully get rid of it. So it's all about just managing and dealing with it and kind of limiting the flare-ups. And when they use their pulses to try and activate it, it kind of kicks them and makes them more active, which obviously when they're more active, their metabolic waste is very discordant because it's all toxic to my system. But it's all done by design. Like I said, it's certainly been used to be weaponized, right? So how mad is that? Again, more proof of the Agent Smiths and the Matrix. Unfortunately, anyone who is not unplugged fully can and will be used by these entities through these technologies, and the entities themselves, manipulating your biofield in order to get to other people. And I've experienced this myself firsthand, of something trying to come into my body, possess me and disrupt my energies and behavior that affected other people, right? So it's very real, this war that's going on. It's just insane how many people got no clue. So we're going to get to the shaman galactivation Soul-Braid walking experience. Ignore the highlight there. This is going to be going through me seeking counsel with a shaman and getting some healing done. As you can see in the top left, that's actually her little cabin where I was led down. So this was all happening around Scorpio season, and it wasn't until early December I got to see the local witch/shaman for a chakra healing and realignment session. I didn't say anything about my story to begin with, and she went ahead with the session. Interestingly, 3 times the stone linked to my third eye had either jumped out of her hand or dropped, indicating a lot of energy in that center for me. The session itself felt good. I did feel the intense energy around my third eye, especially. It was like pinging like mad. But other than that, nothing extraordinary happens within the session. What was weird, though, was that the shaman had picked up on and said afterwards, okay, which kind of startled me a little bit. And I'll paraphrase what she said, but it was along the lines of first saying, I'm going to ask you a question that might sound weird, but I'm going to have to ask you this. And I said, yeah, fine, go ahead. And she said, have you ever felt like you've been abducted? And so I must admit, I was taken a little by surprise. Apparently the energy she was picking up on, she had only felt similar energy on one other individual, which was a woman who had been abducted and had a chip in her body at the back of her neck. And as she was saying this to me, she grabbed a small EMF reader on her shelf under these towels and proceeded to scan my body and back in my neck to check for any signs of EMF chips installed in my body. I said no to ever feeling like I had been abducted, because I've always been pretty conscious, right? My memory serves me very well. Only time I blacked out was that time in the cabin, right, after coming back on the super yachts, given what happened in Cannon Hill in 2018, where she then confirmed there was no signs of any chips, okay, from the readers. She couldn't pick up anything, and confessed that my energy, she confessed to me that my energy was not human. And so she also said there was a walk-in during the session too, which at the time I had no idea of what that meant. But looking back, part of my higher self did come in body to help assist me for this next leg of my journey, now that my chakras have been realigned, which goes with activating DNA and being able to anchor more of my higher self in body. This is also referred to as a Soul-Braid. Iyasha in the Real Christmas Story had this to say about the process of Indigo Child Soul-Braid walking. But I won't bore you with this process because it's very technical and scientific. Otherwise, I explain in my book that she also explains in Voyages 2. the secrets of a mentee, but there's a whole systematic explanation of what happens with this process, which is quite fascinating. So I'm just going to skip all that in order to save time. But this is otherwise what happened with supposed Jeshua 12. That was done through the 12 days of Christmas ritual, right? That I don't know if we've already covered this, but I certainly go over that in my book. So yeah, very, very interesting. That is a scientific explanation of swapping out of certain aspects of your identity in order for higher ones to come in and merge with the body once your template is activated, so you can have your kind of avatar density 4 level 12 DNA substrand activated identity fully embodied down here on the planet, which obviously Jeshua 12 was meant to be the first guy who did that ever since the fall at Breno, which was 208,000 BC, right? Which is why it's very significant, because then it offered us the bloodlines that he left behind and the ability for that 12th DNA strand energy and template to be imbued and run back into the grids of the earth through this stellar activation cycle. That would obviously be part of the Christos realignment mission to stop us in this system falling into the black hole fall. Okay, so it's all part of this commission, this mission of the host, the Crystal River failsafe host, and the Christos realignment mission. So I comment it was all a bit unexpected, but I began to explain to her what had been happening recently, and ever since my crown chakra awakening back in 2017, she was fascinated with my story and supposedly had her 2 guides with her that prompted her to tell me that I was sent by the Galactic Federation. Now, this opened up a whole new avenue for me in regards to coming into awareness of starseeds and the associated connection of souls and stellar races that later led me into the Super Soldier Talk community with James Rink throughout much of 2021, which was a fascinating study and good introduction into some of the races, technologies, and agendas afoot with what was going on here and in space. The Galactic Federation will become of great import, as supposedly J12, who was working with them during this time to settle some issues involving Karma and his twin flame Mary, as we detailed earlier with her being married off to J9 during the Christ period, creating a bit of a problem. Okay, that supposedly was rectified later on as the updates were given in the timeline. The Galactic Federation are otherwise apparently tied with the Anunnaki and J9 from what the MCO AMCC teachings describe. Again, later on in the Voyages 2 book, you can see the Galactic Federation were part of the Syrian councils that were part of the Law of One and the Guardian Alliances. So I don't know whether there's a faction that is kind of fallen and still a faction that's good. Who knows? Things could obviously update. They could have changed allegiances. So I'm just saying at one point in time, they were actually good. But now with the latest dispensations, it seems that they're kind of associated with the fallen agendas. The shaman also told me when dealing with dead people, as I told her about the experience of me seeing this person who committed suicide, that who have crossed over but remain stuck, which happens to her all the time, that in her experience you just have to be assertive and tell them you only want to be contacted on specific nights, because she went on to confess that she can remote view, and as a result of that, MI5 keep tabs on her. She's seen the dark side of the moon with many bases and on remote viewing sessions, and even confessed to seeing a huge underground cloning facility just down the road from where she was that was being run by the Greys in another remote viewing session. She told me she gets a lot of secret society members who want cleansing based on what they had got involved with as well. Okay, so she was an interesting companion that I did confide in her quite a bit over 2 or 3 years. But then we got to a point where some weird stuff was going on in the astrals, where she was robbing me of my energy that I put a stop to. And after that, I kind of just lost contact and realized that I'm the one I've been waiting for. I'm the one that could be my own shaman, my own healer, my own activator. I don't need anyone really outside of myself to rely on in order to, activate my template, heal my template. And certainly if I do go to someone outside of myself, they should be telling me that I've got all the answers and that you should be doing these techniques that you can do, that you can then empower yourself, which is obviously what the Freedom Teachings is all about with what Iyasha Ashiana dispensed. So yeah, quite interesting. And obviously with what she saw with the clones, with the Greys underground, if you recollect, under the United Intruder Resistance affiliations, associations, technologies and stuff like that, when we went through a who's who on the genealogy, right, I think under chapter 6, we saw that the Zeta, the Zephelium, and the Dracos especially all linked into cloning. Okay, they love to clone. It's an interesting encounter nonetheless that propelled me to research more of this concept of starseeds with my supposed ties with the Galactic Federation, walk-ins, and my energy being non-human. I always take things with a pinch of salt and consider them, not letting anyone or anything define my reality until I get sufficient proof and feel into it firsthand. But visiting the shaman was a huge initiation for me, and because of this supposed walk-in, I was elevated to another degree of being guided into more and more information that I was consuming at a rapid rate of what seemed to be a must-know basis. Looking back with the events that unfolded during 2021, it was also an opportunity for my higher self to come in so I could bolster my defenses and gain more strength for what was about to come. A slight technicality, definitions of walk-ins assume the exchange of one soul for another that swaps out at a certain point in one's incarnation, either via prior agreements or necessity. My experience was not a swap, but felt more like a soul-braid, as I had no sense of anything changing or me going elsewhere. I was very much still tethered and tied to my body here and in full control of my full conscious awareness. It just seemed that more of my higher self embodied and emerged with me. So you can see obviously there a few of the races depicted from a few books and images. But like I said, a lot of these authors, unfortunately, again, haven't come into the freedom teachings, the MCO Emerald Covenant freedom teachings, and they're kind of missing a huge, larger context, as I said before, and perspective of this whole drama that we're in for these race lines. But certainly a lot of it does rhyme. But like with the likes of many individuals quite high up, like David Wilcock, Michael Salla, who's that other black dude? I forgot his name, but he talks a lot about Egypt. They're just missing the bigger picture. Like they're picking out the breadcrumbs and they're kind of truthful in a lot of their aspects, but a lot of it is kind of slightly twisted towards the Thothian like Emerald Covenant of the Green Tablets that he manipulated once he gained hold of the 11th Cloister Dora tablet, and then he edited the records once he defected from the Emerald Covenant with his biogenesis program to fulfill the Luciferian covenant, right, that he was connected into. And so yeah, it's just incredible, like how so many people are still shut out from the incredible body of knowledge that was dispensed by Speaker One. That Jeshua 12 was Speaker One 2,000 years ago, relaying the same kind of information post Atlantis that these unfortunately Leviathan races have been trying to snuff out and keep us from knowing ever since they've kind of set up shop down here with what they've done with sinking the Atlantis, especially in the last 24,000 years. There's been a lot that's been done on the planet and to our race line and to our genetics and DNA to render us complete amnesiac babbling lemmings that have kind of just lost the plot. But we're in a time now where, thanks to the age of information, we're here, we can seek the truth is here, it's been reseeded, it's available. But it's just, like I said, very astonishing how so many people just they're still blocked out from finding it, which otherwise proves to me that they're either missing a few activations in their DNA strands or are deliberately running the kind of ulterior agenda and deliberately leaving out or being guided to leave out the whole truth of the greater perspective and context that's otherwise shared in the freedom teachings. So I always had this sense that my origins were not native to Earth and that I had come from another place. I've not been able to unlock my cellular memories yet, but as I've shared, I had this sense of being in battle and having my right side severely wounded that is echoed in this hologram at various points during my awakening. So what happened with that, really not sure, still trying to work it out. The missions of Starseeds do vary, but one underlying constant is this running of energy through our bodies and into the grids that helps with this whole transition and interface with the gates and all forms of life on the planet. As the glossary refers to it as acupuncture needles sent from the heavens to be inserted into Earth's multidimensional anatomy so that these energies can run through us and into Earth's core encryption lattice that communicates the morphogenetic field and subtle body anatomy and all the way into what we see as physical and below, and obviously into the stargates. This will assist greatly those parts of Earth's anatomy that will send back into the deity planes and merge with its twin flame female planetary counterpart, Eartha, in Andromeda. And apparently in the later workshops, Yasha refers to Earth as actually being a masculine broadcasting station, whereas in the earlier works, she refers to Earth as being a she and a her. Okay, so, go figure. There's always updates with more knowledge and information, even though kind of like almost androgynous. It's kind of, I think, on a more energetic level, the encryption of it being slightly more masculine in regards to an electric broadcasting station rather than magnetic in relation to how, God Source creates reality systems with polarity, with obviously the Pardakai being the original androgynous embodiment of both the Pardakai and Pardakam that then, through fission and fusion separates and creates this kind of polarity of electromagnetism, male and female aspects. So by that point, beings on planet will have activated their plasma body in order to syncopate with the new templates when we reach the deity planes and energy of this eternal life form in order to exist in that reality. So it's accordingly the plan at the moment with what's being dispensed with the mission upgrades and mission updates. So there would also be a common theme with starseeds having a high capacity for learning, a high capacity to detect BS and lies propagated by people, institutions, and governments, and an overall calling to come back in alignment with the truth and harmonious mindful living. We're also very rebellious and don't take too kindly to control structures, hierarchies, and authorities that are certainly aligned with, the anti-Christic ideological philosophies of the arrogance and elitism, sexism, and the exploitation of resources, especially, kind of all goes into that fallen angelic mindset. As Manny P. Hall beautifully surmised, open quote, truth is beautifully concealed, while falsehood is complex, deeply hidden, proud, and its fictitious worldly knowledge, seemingly a glitter with godly luster, is often mistaken for divine wisdom, close quote. There will be many submissions that unfold for the starseeds to help integrate the Christic ways alongside doing the most important job, which is just holding space and anchoring energies, doing the shadow work, clearing the template, that may vary in many different fields of expertise, such as economics or Richard A. Verner's work, exposing the corruption of the economic sciences, and banking. A lot of people in the self-help communities, again, a lot of individuals also helping to bridge the gap in frequency from the complexity and detail of the freedom teachings to make it more reachable for individuals who aren't carrying that kind of sixth strand DNA activation. So that's what that voyages to. Most of our lectures are kind of written and verbalized in, which is highly technical. So there's many individuals now starting to bridge the gap in explaining these more complex, detailed mechanics of creation, mathematics, and our history, races, and agendas and technologies in a much more simple format that can reach more of those individuals to help them, digest the information, activate their template too. Because I find that if things are explained so technically, not in layman terms, you won't be able to absorb it. You aren't at that level. Okay, this also goes into the gunning fog index with how the law writes compared to what we're trained at with school, with grammar and writing, that we're only at a level, grade 8 level. And then if you look at, the gunning fog index, which is the reading difficulty and writing difficulty of texts, of statutes, acts, law, and all that, it's like up at a PhD level. And so no wonder why people find it hard to learn the law and be involved with that process of understanding their rights and the law and the whole procedures surrounding the whole judicial setup, right, of the executive branches, legislative and judiciary, is because that gap in frequency, right? So it's so important. The best teachers, the best guardians out there are helping to bridge that gap and to engage more individuals, to pull them back up, to get them quickly aligned to being able to then grab hold of the source material and dissect it themselves and read through it without kind of getting yawn waves, falling tired, and just not really letting it sink in. So there may be varying levels of awakened starseeds also in regards to what serves the mission best. There may be a lot of sleepers out there who are contributing on the mission by helping to hold space, but mostly unaware of the galactic heritage. Many may be awakened like I was, or many may also spend most of their lives unaware. Then you have those who are targeted by the negative forces in order to help perpetuate their agenda and establish their ownership and control over certain parts of the grids. These are often called indigo hunts, and this was certainly what I had come to experience with these vicious attacks that I did not know at the time, okay, but certainly looking back, it was when I came into more information with my research. It is important to note that in the later works in the MCO AMCC teachings, after the shield split in 2012, the high internal eternal mechanics and structure of creation with the plasma levels was revealed to Speaker 1, who dispensed accordingly. She states that the Finborns, okay, are the ones who incarnate directly from the deity planes, having already done a full Adeshia Adept return cycle of ascension, who carry the highest of the highest codes and who are able to run the plasmids of the failsafe. This goes into the story of what Jeshua 12 left behind with the 8 secret bloodlines in order to allow the gene code to exist on planet, ready for this time when it came for us to incarnate here. Likewise, this would have been necessitated to allow Indigos and Starseeds to incarnate with their higher encryption as the body template with the gene code potential that both bloodlines possesses between the parents will determine the capacity and level of soul it could potentially harbour. So there was a vested interest from both sides of this game to keep the bloodlines alive and on planet, ready for this end times drama. And as you read the history, the biggest problem, it seems, came from interbreeding with digressive races that came in either forcibly or under seduction and trickery, and obviously through biogenesis programs that really started to convolute the template that the consciousness embodied and came into, right? That morphogenetically speaking, your consciousness does adopt as well. That's why it's so important to, with these bloodlines and these programs, that it's strict and that it's all done under guided covenants. Because if you read the history, like I said before, all of the major problems happened when these digressive races came in and started to interbreed and splice some of their DNA morphogenetic, which is their expression of consciousness, which, you know, for the Dracons and these fallen races are very aggressive, very elitist, very sexist. It causes a huge problem. Okay, and that seems to be the biggest problem is sex. Okay, interbreeding through obviously coitus acts with other race lines. Okay, so that's why to be pure is to protect the bloodline and to know who you're going to be leaving, you know, part of yourself or, you know, another body behind with the bloodline when procreating, and being conscious of that fact. And that's why obviously a lot of that has been abused and manipulated and weaponized again with the sacral plexus and the energy centers and the sexual desire, because that then helps steer the whole course of these bloodlines and what these negative digressive races are able to get in and control in human form, and even eventually, you know, body snatch and come right in body to embody that human template, even though it's not part of the agreement and they shouldn't be there in the first place. So I've got here an image of a blood type test that I did, which is otherwise linked into O negative, which is iconical of also a starseed, apparently, through my research. And so I've got blood type O negative, and you can get these tests online, quite cheap on Amazon, sent out to you, and check yourself what's going on with that. So I write in my book, pulling the definitions from Voyagers 2 and also the Ascension Glossary of, you know, what starseeds, indigos, and FIMS are. We obviously understand that FIMS are the more higher level, coming directly from the deity planes of internal eternal creation, and it's the Fatali who are the fallen version of these Fimborns, right? And you've got indigos, you've got three different types of indigos, type 1, type 2, type 3, all have different missions. In regards to their submissions, the main one is obviously to run energies into the grid. You've got the starseeds, the human angelic souls with the 12 DNA strand potential. Indigos have anything from 12 to 24 up to 36 to 48, and the FIMS probably have even more as well within their morphogenetic fields when coming in. And so who I am, at least probably an indigo, whether I'm a Fimborn possibly, certainly resonates with what I see out picturing with this kind of plasma fail-safe host, given the latest dispensations that I seem to be connected into. So yes, that's probably what I am also connected into, those FIM lines. And yeah, I won't go into too much depth, but otherwise you can look up on essentialglossary.com and Voyagers 2, Secrets of a Mentee, as to what they say about starseeds, indigos, and FIMS in more detail. And otherwise, I'll just write here. They say that Rh negative blood is indicative of a starseed and not the most often related and quoted ties with reptilian or draconian genetics. I managed to do a blood type test to confirm that I am blood type O negative. The Rh signifies the positive or negative attribute to the blood, with the positive meaning presence of a protein found on the surface of the red blood cells, with negative showing no signs. As we were seeing with the history and holographic structure of our time matrix with the MCO AMCC cosmogeny, the most important mission for so-called starseeds here during the cycle is to help anchor this fail-safe bridge in order to stabilize the gates for this evacuation of consciousness over the next 900 years or so, which is obviously being brought forward now pretty much, with this great cosmic reset coming home party with this that is underway as guided and enacted by divine will. And because we know that consciousness instructs and determines the matter template via morphogenetic fields, beings who carry a higher morphogenetic template based on their evolution and where they incarnated from will bring with them varying potentials for DNA that can be assembled and activated that the blood acts as a charge for. So at the end of the chapter, I basically talk about karma and how that's been abused, especially. I mean, we all know a little bit about karma, which kind of goes into simply the laws of cause and effect. You know, good or bad, what you put out comes back to you. welcome to Karma Cafe. There is no menu. You will get served what you deserve, right? Now, what's interesting to comment on this, otherwise I write the definitions of, which again, the Essential Glossary Online by Lisa Renee has a good explanation, okay, of how the negative alien agenda and the intruder races are weaponizing karma again and actually offloading their negative karmic miasma to be processed by us individuals and as a collective, okay, which kind of goes into, there's a mimicry of this happening at a more elemental level when understanding that humans are the best detoxifying agents or beings who have the best detoxifying organs on the planet when getting rid of nuclear waste. That in the US at least, this is going on where in order to get rid of the nuclear waste, they passed laws to allow to irradiate chicken and then propagandize the benefits of that in order for people to believe that, okay, it's going to get rid of the salmonella and this, that, and the other under the guise of, good health. That covertly the main mission, main goal for them doing that, the main motivation was to actually then get the people to eat the chicken, because these industries knew that we are the best way to get rid of that nuclear waste because we have the best detoxifying system in our bodies, which obviously none more so than the liver, as we touched on before, and that connection with Jupiter and Jesus and sin. It dies for our sins every day because it cleans out most of the shit that we put in our body, and how Jupiter is linked to the liver in our anatomy. Jupiter rules the age of Pisces. Jesus is meant to be this savior figure, right? The sun in the age of Pisces, and how it all connects with that, with him being, so-called speared in the side, which some paintings represent him being speared in the liver, which kind of confirms this connection of sin and how it died and resurrected itself, because this organ, at least on the astrobiological level, can pretty much lose 80% of its capacity in terms of almost die, but then resurrect itself, regenerate itself. It's the only organ that can do that. So it's fascinating how that all connects. So even on like an earthly level, if you then translate that analogy of what's going on with, like, for instance, using us to get rid of nuclear waste through irradiating chicken, right? That on an energetic level, they are doing the same kind of tricks that's going on in order to get us to process other people's shit, okay, and other negative karmic consequences. So another good thing to comment on, and important to note that I picked up on with Yash's lectures, is that in a Christic system, for every action, there's an opposite but proportionate reaction. Whereas in a fallen anti-Christic system, Metatronic system that we're in, with their philosophies and how their mathematics and everything is designed, they teach that there's an equal and opposite reaction to every action, right? Which goes into this kind of eye for an eye concept. Okay, so very interesting how there's even differences in the philosophies of karma, right? That certainly all does ring true in regards to you only get out what you put in, what you put out, you get back. It's just natural cause and effect in the laws of energy dynamics with physics, right? But certainly within the fallen systems, there is this twist that there's this kind of like give and take, this yin and yang. It's not proportional. It's not proportionate, So I think that's a good quality to kind of understand, and otherwise understand that there is plenty of ways that these guys are offloading bad karma onto us to process on their behalf, which is allowing them to, again, get away with doing everything that they're doing. And so it's really important to consciously be aware of this, and again, work with your shadow work in order to dispel any consent you may have or may have been construed to be given to allow entities to do this to you, that might otherwise go into why you're struggling to kind of get out of a rut, get out of this kind of like cycle that you might be in. And this also goes into the technologies of black hole, which is the T Mobius time waves of the backflow, that kind of, as it moves forward, it eats what's left behind, and it's in like a closed loop. And so you kind of can get stuck in these T Mobius time wave Ouroboros loops, which is all part of this black hole technology, where the past kind of comes up and repeats itself over and over again. And this can obviously go into this looping karmic miasmic mess that you're constantly stuck in order to process on behalf of fallen angelics, right? And which is then obviously used through their technologies too. So really important to consciously dispel that. when doing your own, I guess, affirmations, right? And terms and conditions, even on paper, verbally, in your mind's eye, meditating, write it down, even send it into these guys for the governments, right? And do whatever you want to do, spell work, use your imagination, but just be mindful of this going forward, that always withdraw consent, protect your energy, and don't give these guys any excuses to otherwise construe and trick you into giving away your consent, and otherwise, yeah, keep you locked into that fear frequency. As you can see there on the slide, it activates very low or low frequency energy wave that activates less of your DNA, whereas love, truth, high vibration, high frequency activates more of your higher self and helps then align everything with the better timeline, the crystal organic timeline of ascension. Okay, folks, so that's pretty much everything in this presentation, in this chapter. Like I said, I won't read into too much from my book, so otherwise it'll take up a lot of time. But yeah, I do go in depth about this concept of karma. A lot of individuals, quite interesting. I read a book, Thomas H. Burgoyne, The Light of Egypt, I think it's called, and he goes into karma quite in depth, saying that's a scam. It's definitely been weaponized, and I kind of had that feeling too, in regards to how, in like past life karma, how can I improve on anything in regards to a lesson if I do not know what I had done in previous lives, right? If I come in here and I'm blank slated, how can I learn and grow if I do not know what the mistake was? And I think this all goes into the tricks and traps being done in order to offload karma. Obviously, the law of karma has been linked to Saturn. We know what Saturn's plugged into. So I think it's a huge manipulative scheme that keeps people stuck in cycles that are probably, bestowed from other entities and their karmic miasms, right? So just on an earthly level, again, if you're trying to fix a problem and become better and grow and develop yourself, then you must have access to your past and your history and the decisions that you made, so you can consciously work to use that as a springboard and foundation to look back and reflect and say, okay, right, I know I reacted wrong then. I made the wrong decision at that time. I should have been better here, should have been better there. The only way you can improve is if you have memory and you reflect upon what's come before. So the whole concept of like being subject to karma from lifetime to lifetime, I think for me is definitely being weaponized when you can't even remember what's gone on in previous lives, and you can't even remember the kind of manipulations that have been done by these fallen forces in order to keep, put you in these situations where you're making these decisions and you're being set up in situations that are probably orchestrated in order to force you to make these kind of decisions that lead to negative consequences for you and others. Then that's used to pin you against the cross and to make you feel guilty and ashamed, which all goes into the kind of technologies and tactics these folks use to kind of keep us submissive to them. And even Pierce writes about this in his latest book, Angelic Invasion, with a lot of the testimonies of individuals working with or having experiences with like abductions and seeing entities, that there's this overlying frequency of them feeling ashamed, which kind of makes them more compliant through the experiences, and guilt tripping, which obviously goes into this kind of fear of God, fear of being judged, that they almost telepathically and through psychotronic weaponry and technologies imbue on us, and then in a way make us feel guilty, which then makes us more consentful in order to then maybe harbor and for them to offload their karmic miasmas for us to process, which is all part of this tricks and traps, right? It's very sophisticated, very detailed, but sitting and meditating on it, and I write about this, it certainly makes a lot of sense, right? That there's been heavy distortions when it comes to karma, for sure. Okay, so it's all about being conscious, learning about these subjects in order to disband them. They only have power because of our ignorance. Ignorance, like Manny Pior says, is linked to the darkness. That's where black magic works the best, when we do not know about these subtle forces that are working, that we can put a stop to consciously, right? So it's all about bringing the truth, the light of day, into the darkness and shining that within our own anatomy and our shadow bodies, unconscious, subconscious selves, and in the hologram around us, being more vigilant, diligent as to what's happening, what's out picturing, and yeah, consciously navigating and protecting our energy, withdrawing consent, and being mindful when choosing the correct actions that will bring us to our ascension potential during these times, right? So hope you enjoyed that, folks. In the next presentation, chapter 13, We're going to be going through the quantum grammar language fraud, which connects into the Tower of Babel incident with what happened there. More about spells, me encountering my first grey aliens in these experiences out of body, which is quite interesting. The super soldier and secret space program community, the men in black, and my first encounter with the mantid Aethian praying mantis being. That seems to be connected to obviously the seraphim races and the guardians. That seems to be very closely tied with one of my guardians that I'm connected into. So yeah, as always, guys, stay safe, stay sovereign, and I'll see you in the next one. Ciao for now.